Well, Nigeria's monetary policy rate has been left unchanged at 14%. The cash reserve requirement and liquidity ratio were also left steady at 22.5% and 30% respectively. The Monetary Policy Committee feels tightening could dampen the positive outlook for growth and financial stability. It also believes loosening could push consumer prices and pressurize the exchange rate. The Apex Bank governor called for urgent passage of the 2018 budget.
Loosening would strengthen the outlook for growth by stimulating domestic aggregate demand through reduced cost of borrowing. It could nevertheless aggravate upward trend in consumer prices and generate exchange rate pressures. Committee also feels that loosening would worsen the current account balance of the country through increased importation. Consequently, MPC voted to 1. Retain MPR at 14%, 2. Retain CRR at 22.5%, 3. Retain the liquidity ratio at 30%, and 4. Retain the asymmetric corridor at plus 200 and minus 500 basis points around the MPR.
Also joining me to talk more about that in the studio now is the head research FSDH Merchant Bank, Ayo Akinwunmi. Many thanks for your time, Ayo.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, first off, let's begin with the MPC leaving the interest rate unchanged. Of course, many had predicted that, many saw that coming, but many still saw or still felt the MPC would relax its stance. What's your own take? Okay,
thank you very much for having me tonight. I think FXTH Research was one of the very few analysts that believed that it was time for us to begin to have monetary policy easing. And then we released a note last week prior to the meeting, and we said the short-term outlook favors monetary policy easing. And we discussed about the outlook of inflation, which, I mean, the last time I appeared on your program, I said our forecast shows that we may likely have single digit next year. We begin to see stability in foreign exchange rates. The growth that the NBS released yesterday was actually very fragile growth, stimulated by oil, basically. And if oil hadn't gone as much as, about 25% year on year, we may, maybe the growth would have been about maybe 1%, 0.2% or about. 2%. So, which is quite weak. Non-oil sector contracted again. Nearly every other key sectors of the economy contract apart from agriculture. Of course, dominated by crop production. And of course, it's even the growth there is still very weak. So we think that there is a need for both the monetary policy and the fiscal policy to implement policies that will stimulate the economy. And if you look at the communique that the MPC issued at the end of that meeting, it actually alluded to this one. But they have left the...
So would you say the MPC is justified based on saying it could, if it loosens, it could push consumer prices? Of course, this is December. We expect a lot of money in circulation.
I believe that the major drivers of the consumer prices that we have in Nigeria today are, number one, the bottlenecks that we have in production process in Nigeria, the wastage that we have in agricultural production, the fact that we don't have good roads, food, crops that are produced in the farm before they get to the market, to the consumers, a whole lot of them will have been destroyed. And therefore, if you can fix some of those things without necessarily tampering with monetary policies, which of course they cannot address, you will say that food prices will drop, and which will allow inflation rate to go down. Even though if Central Bank had, yes, they mentioned the fact that the correct tightening policy had actually brought down factors that drove down the inflation, but at what impact do we see that happening? The contributions to that is, for me, it will be very low. We need structural policies to address the structural rigidities in the economy. We need policies that will address the bottlenecks in production process. Electricity is there. I mean, the last time I appeared on your program, when the World Bank released the 2017 Ease of Doing Business, I mentioned the fact that we are still scoring very low in electricity generation and trading across border. These are issues that we need to address before we can have a sustainable low interest rate.
At the other side of the break, Ayo will be talking about, we'll look deeply at the growth rate of the economy that was released yesterday, and we'll see how these policies, or what direction these policies should be further. As you have said, I know you've talked about that, but we'll look deeper into that. But that will be after the break. You're watching Business Tonight. You're watching Business Tonight. We've been talking the MPC and, of course, the GDP, the growth rate of the economy. And Ayo Akinwunmi is with me on this. Now, let's look at the result of, or the growth rate released yesterday. And with what we saw, the oil sector is still largely responsible for the growth that we experienced. But, of course, we know that was what dragged the country into recession. So it seems we're still hovering around that area before we go into manufacturing.
Okay, yes, of course, I have said a number of times that we need oil to diversify the economy away from oil.
We need the earnings.
Yes, account for 10% of the GDP. However, it accounts for more than 80% of the revenue that we have in the country. And in providing foreign exchange earnings for the country is a very important source. So for me, I think that the increase in oil price that we have seen in the last few months has encouraged the operators in that sector to go back to field to produce the productions that were not profitable. Before now. They were profitable, and so we are beginning to see the impact of that on the GDP. However, that's not a sustainable way to go, because it's fixed with a lot of factors that are beyond our control. We need to use the money to build infrastructure. We need to use the money to, government of course is working now to ensure that they to grow the tax revenue, which is one of the lowest in the world. That we have in Nigeria. So those, and they develop agriculture, bring private sector to develop infrastructure, tackle electricity problem, road, railway system, and so that we can have a very functional infrastructure in the country that will make our economy very competitive.
And it's unfortunately until that is done before we can have a vibrant manufacturing sector, because from that report, the performance for manufacturing is still very poor. It declined by 2.9%. And of course, the service sector also was affected, all weighed down by the telecoms sector there. But what policies do you think, of course, this is no longer within the reach of the NPC. It's now more of fiscal policies, the way it is looking. What policies do you think the government can put in place, very briefly?
I think they need to involve the private sector to develop the infrastructure, to create jobs. If you look at the NPC communique today, they said the purchasing power in the country is still very weak. That's important. We need to address that, and the way to address that is to ensure that inflation comes down, we have foreign exchange stability, and there is job creation in the country, so that people who should be working will be able to work and be able to increase their spending.
All right,
power.
Ayo, just before I let you go, another trend we noticed with the NBS report is that it has adopted a practice of revising the previous GDP growth rate. Don't you think if it continues that way, it will affect the current rate of 1.4% in the fourth quarter?
Okay, so in the US, you have first release, second release, and third release, which is usually the final release. So there is nothing wrong in revising the previous quarter's numbers when you are releasing the current quarter, because if you have additional information that will make you to go and release the previous quarter, you are allowed to do that. And that's so there's no problem. So if by the time they are going to release Q4 report, if there are indications that the Q3 report that they have, there are additional data that will make them to revise this, they will need to revise. So there's no problem. There is no problem with that one.
All right, Ayo Akinwunmi with FSDH Merchant Bank. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for
on
having
Business
me.
Tonight.
Thank you.